The city was soaked in the kind of rain that made everything feel slower, softer, and a little bit dangerous. Taxi tires hissed through puddles. Streetlights bled into the wet pavement, glowing gold and red like bruised skin. Inside La Bellissima, a small but elegant Italian restaurant tucked between two tall glass buildings, the lights were warm and dim, the kind of light made for secrets and whispered conversations. Amara checked her reflection in the glass door before stepping inside. Her hair was damp from the rain, but her red dress still clung perfectly to her curves. She'd spent 2 hours convincing herself this wasn't a mistake. It was just a blind date, nothing more. She'd promised her best friend she would give dating a chance again. One dinner, one drink. If he was boring, she'd leave. Simple. But the universe had other plans. She walked in, heart hammering a little too fast, and scanned the room for the man whose face she'd only seen once, a blurry profile picture on a dating app. A man in a charcoal suit raised his hand. Table near the back, expensive wine already poured. That must be him. She didn't notice the second table, the one just behind it. She didn't notice the man sitting alone, dark suit sharp as sin, a watch worth more than her apartment on his wrist. She didn't notice how his gaze had already found her. She walked straight to the wrong table. "Hi," she said with a smile that was nervous and polite. His eyes flicked up slowly, like a wolf lifting its head from the shadows, not the man from the app. Not even close. This man was older, sharper. His presence made the air around the table heavier. His black suit clung to broad shoulders, his hair slicked back with rain still clinging to it. A scar cut lightly across his jaw, not ugly but dangerous in a way that made her breath catch. She froze. I think I'm at the wrong sit, he said softly. She should have turned around. But she didn't. His name was Dominic Moretti. He didn't offer a handshake, only gestured to the chair across from him. The waiter, already nervous, refilled their glasses like he'd been trained to stay silent. Amara sat down slowly, unsure why she was listening to him at all. Her heart thudded against her ribs, but something in his eyes rooted her in place. It wasn't charm. It was gravity. "You don't belong here," he said, not unkindly. She blinked. "Then why did you ask me to sit?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Because I wanted to see if you would." He leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking softly. His gaze wasn't the kind that wandered. It stayed. He studied her like a man used to getting everything he looked at. She tried to steady her voice. "I'm supposed to meet someone else?" He tilted his head. "And yet, you're still here." Her cheeks flushed. "Only because you told me to sit, did I?" His voice was low, smooth as warm whiskey. "Or did you want to?" The heat in her chest spread like wildfire. She hated that his words made her heartbeat stumble. She hated how he spoke as if he already knew her secrets. "I don't even know who you are," she whispered. His eyes darkened. "No, but you will." The waiter returned with a bottle of red wine. Dominic didn't look at the menu. He didn't ask her what she wanted. He ordered for both of them in a voice so calm and commanding, the waiter almost bowed. Amara should have been offended. Instead, her pulse quickened. She told herself it was just curiosity. That's all it was. "So," she said, swirling the wine nervously, "what do you do?" His smile was slow, dangerous. "I make problems disappear." The way he said it wasn't playful. But it wasn't threatening either. It was matter of fact. Like a man who didn't need to explain himself. Her throat went dry. "You mean, like I'm not the kind of man you were supposed to meet tonight?" He finished for her. Their food arrived, but she barely tasted it. His voice wrapped around every corner of the table, low and steady, pulling her in. He didn't ask typical first date questions. He didn't pretend. He just talked about the city, about the rain, about Silent Dot, and every time he said her name, Amara, It rolled off his tongue like a promised dot by the time she realized it. She was leaning forward, her fingers resting lightly against the stem of her glass, listening to a stranger like she'd known him forever. "You shouldn't trust me," he said suddenly. She blinked. "Why?" "Because if you do," his eyes locked with hers, "you won't want to leave." Her heart skipped a beat. She pushed her chair back, trying to remind herself this was wrong. That somewhere in this restaurant, a man was probably waiting for her at the right table. But before she could stand, Dominic's hand brushed the edge of her wrist. Not a grab, not forceful, just a whisper of a touch, warm, steady, claiming her attention without demanding it. "Don't look for him," he said softly. "Look at me." Her breath caught. The rain outside roared against the windows like it was listening. She should have walked away, but she didn't. She sat back down, heartbeat pounding in her ears. His fingers brushed against hers, slow and deliberate this time. The world outside blurred. All she could see was him dot, and for the first time in a long time, Amara felt something she couldn't name, dangerous and beautiful all at once. Dominic leaned in, voice low. "You walked to the wrong table tonight, Amara?" "No," she whispered back. "I think I walked into trouble." He smiled, the kind of smile that made storms feel like secrets. "Exactly." The rain hadn't stopped since that night. The kind of cold, steady rain that soaked into your bones and made every street feel like it was holding a secret. Amara hadn't told anyone what happened at the restaurant. She didn't even have the words for it. She'd gone in for a simple blind date, a safe night, nothing special, and walked straight into the orbit of a man who made the air itself bend around him. Dominic Moretti. His name had lingered in her mind, like a whisper she couldn't shake. The way his voice rolled over her name, the way his fingers brushed her wrists without asking. It wasn't normal. It was dangerous. And worse, it was unforgettable. The next morning, she sat at her favorite cafe, hands wrapped around a cup of steaming coffee, trying to convince herself it had all been a mistake. He was a stranger, she told herself. He was trouble. She'd sat at the wrong table. That's all. That's where it should end. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw him leaning back in that chair, smirk like sin, voice low and steady. "If you trust me, you won't want to leave." Her fingers tightened around her cup. She hadn't even given him her number. She'd walked away before the end of the night. He shouldn't be able to find her, but wolves don't need permission. They hunt. It was almost dusk when she left the cafe. The streets glimmered under wet streetlights, reflections of headlights bending across puddles. She adjusted her umbrella, heart a little too aware of the silence around her. That was when she felt it, that quiet, uncheckable pull, the way you just know someone's eyes are on you. She turned, scanning the street. A black car, sleek, expensive, wrong for this neighborhood, was parked across from the flower shop. Its windows were tinted too dark. Its engine wasn't running, but it was there, watching. Her pulse quickened. It can't be him. She started walking faster. The sound of her heels echoed through the rain. She was almost at her apartment building when she saw the figure leaning against the lamppost. Black suit, coat dripping with rain, hair slicked back. Dominic. He wasn't rushing toward her. He wasn't calling out. He was just standing there, waiting. The kind of patience that doesn't come from kindness. The kind of patience that comes from control. Her breath hitched. "How did you? I told you," he said softly, stepping forward. "If you trust me, you won't want to leave." She stumbled back a step. "I didn't give you my number." He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing with something that wasn't quite a smile. "I didn't need it." The way he said it, calm, deliberate, made something inside her flutter and freeze at the same time. The rain fell harder as he closed the distance between them. She tried to hold her ground, but he was taller, broader, and carried the kind of presence that made space for him without asking, "What do you want?" She asked. He looked down at her, rain dripping from his hair, his black shirt clinging to his chest. "Dinner." She almost laughed. "Are you serious?" "Very. I don't even know you." "You will." Her pulse skipped. "You're insane." His voice dipped low, velvet and dangerous. "No, sweetheart. I'm determined." She should have walked away. She should have turned, locked her door, called the police. But instead, she hesitated, and that was enough for him to take one more step forward. Dominic wasn't touching her. Not yet, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the cold rain. Close enough to hear his slow, even breathing. Close enough that her umbrella didn't matter anymore. "Why me?" She whispered, almost against her own will. He didn't flinch. "Because you sat down? That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to." The air between them tightened, like the world itself was leaning in to listen. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded card. He didn't hand it to her. He slid it into her coat pocket gently, deliberately. His fingers brushed against her hip just long enough to send a shiver down her spine. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. 7 p.m. She frowned. "What if I don't come?" For the first time, he smiled fully. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel. It was the kind of smile that promised trouble. "Then I'll find you again." Her breath caught. "You don't get to decide everything, Amara," he added softly. "Some things just happen." He turned away before she could answer, walked toward the car. The rain soaked his suit, but he didn't seem to care. He opened the back door, slid inside, and within seconds the car was gone, taillights fading into the night. Amara stood frozen on the sidewalk, the cold raindrops biting against her skin. Heart hammering, the card in her pocket was warm from his touch. She pulled it out with shaking fingers. No name, no message. Just a time. 7 p.m. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, towel around her shoulders, hair dripping. She kept telling herself she wasn't going, that she wasn't that girl, but her hands betrayed her. They kept tracing the outline of the card. She looked at herself in the mirror, flushed cheeks, parted lips, eyes too bright. She didn't recognize this version of herself, the one who felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, because of a man she barely knew. A man she should stay away from, and yet, outside her building, the same black car was parked in the shadows. Its lights were off. Its windows were black. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just waited. Dominic Moretti wasn't asking her to choose him. He was making sure that when she did, it wouldn't feel like a choice at all. Amara lay awake long after midnight, listening to the rain. She could feel him in the dark, not in her room, not in her building, but in the air. A presence that didn't fade when the storm quieted. She turned the card over in her hand again and again, whispering to herself that she wasn't going, but the part of her that still remembered the heat of his voice, the way the world disappeared when he spoke, that part whispered back, "You're already his." The next day came slower than any day Amara could remember. Rain clouds hung low over the city, painting everything in muted gray. The streets were wet and shining, every car light bending across puddles like whispers. She told herself at least 100 times that she wasn't going, that she was smart, careful, safe, but 6:30 p.m. found her standing in front of her mirror, staring at a woman who didn't look like the version of herself from yesterday. Her hair was curled loosely at the ends. Her black dress clung softly to her waist, elegant but simple. A touch of red on her lips. She tried to tell herself it was just curiosity, nothing more, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew the truth. She was already walking back to the wrong table, When she stepped out of her apartment building, the black car was already there. Engine humming. Tinted windows catching the reflection of the streetlights. She hesitated on the steps. She should have walked away, but the back door opened without anyone getting out. A driver, dressed in black, stood beside it with a quiet bow. Miss Amara. Her pulse jumped. How do you? Mr. Moretti is waiting. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her feet betrayed her before her brain could fight back. She slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her bare arms. The door closed with a soft click, like a secret being sealed. Outside, the city blurred by in streaks of gold and gray. Inside, the silence had a heartbeat of its own. She expected a restaurant. What she got was a mansion. The car stopped in front of a wrought iron gate. Beyond it stood a sprawling estate, stone walls, soft lights glowing against the rain, fountains still flowing like the storm couldn't touch them. Amar's throat tightened. What have I walked into? The driver opened her door. This way, miss. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood and rain-soaked roses. Hallways lined with gold accents and old paintings stretched out like a maze. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a kingdom. And he was the king. Dominic Moretti was waiting at the top of the marble staircase. Black suit, no tie, top buttons undone. His eyes found her the second she stepped inside, and the rest of the world ceased to exist. You came, he said softly. She tried to sound strong. I shouldn't have. He descended the staircase slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. But you did. When he reached her, the storm outside cracked with thunder. She felt it vibrate in her chest. His hand didn't touch her, not yet, but the pull between them was undeniable. Like gravity, like danger, you look... His voice dropped low, almost like a growl. Perfect. Her breath caught. She hated how easily those words burned through her. This is insane, she whispered. I don't even know you. He leaned closer. Then let me change that. He led her to a long dining room where only one end of the massive table was set. 2 plates. One candle flickering softly between them. Why here? She asked as she sat down, her voice a little unsteady. His answer was simple. Because I don't share. The way he said it wasn't loud. It was quiet, too quiet, like someone stating a fact that couldn't be undone. She should have found it arrogant. Instead, it felt like a spark crawling down her spine. The dinner wasn't loud or fancy. It was quiet, intimate, but under the surface of every word, there was something else, a tension thick enough to taste. You're not a normal man, she said finally. Dominic's lips curved. And you're not a woman who would have sat down at that table if you wanted normal. Her heartbeat stumbled. This isn't safe. I've never been safe, he said simply. But I don't hurt what's mine. She stared at him across the candlelight. I'm not yours. His eyes darkened. Then why are you here? The air around them tightened. Raindrops hammered the windows. And for the first time, Amara didn't have an answer. After dinner, they walked through a wide hallway lined with glass windows. The garden outside was soaked in rain, the lamps glowing like stars caught in puddles. She paused near the window, her breath fogging the glass. This doesn't feel real. Dominic stopped behind her, close, not touching, but close enough for his warmth to seep through the thin fabric of her dress. Close enough for her heart to forget what study felt like. It is, he murmured. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted them to the glass. His hand rose, slowly, resting on the window beside hers. No contact, just closeness, enough to set her pulse on fire. Why me? She asked. His voice was low, dangerous, beautiful. Because the moment you sat at my table, the world shifted. She turned to face him. The storm outside made the world dark and soft at the same time. His face was only inches from hers, shadows tracing his jaw. His eyes burned with the kind of focus that didn't belong to strangers. He raised his hand slowly, almost asking without words. She didn't move away. His fingers brushed against her cheek. Soft, careful. Touch that carried both danger and worship. You're trouble, she whispered. He admitted Dot. She could feel his breath now. Warm against the cold storm. He stepped closer, closing the last inch between them. She could feel his chest rise and fall against hers, steady like a storm he controlled. Every man in this city is afraid of me, he said softly. But when you look at me, you don't flinch. You breathe. She swallowed hard. Maybe I'm stupid. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw. No, maybe you're mine. Her breath hitched. I don't belong to anyone. A faint smile ghosted his lips. Then why does your heartbeat sound like it's already decided? She should have pushed him away. But instead, her hands found the lapels of his coat without thinking. She could feel the warmth of him even through the wet fabric. His scent, smoke, rain, something darker, wrapped around her like silk. The window behind them shook with thunder. The air between them burned. He leaned closer, slow enough to give her every second to stop him. She didn't. His forehead rested against hers. No kiss, no demand. Just heat, intensity, the kind of nearness that left no room to breathe. You're scared, he whispered. She nodded. Good, he said softly. So am I. When the car dropped her home, the rain was still falling softly. She stood at her door, soaked in stormlight, the echo of his touch still on her skin. She told herself it was a mistake, that she wouldn't go back, but behind her closed eyes, all she could feel was the way he whispered mine without saying the word. And down the street, the black car waited, as silent as the wolf watching from the shadows. The storm didn't leave the city. It just changed shape. It was no longer a quiet, distant sound on rooftops. It lived in the air now, heavy, tense, like the city itself was holding its breath. For 3 nights, Amara tried to tell herself that what happened in Dominic Moretti's mansion was a mistake. Just a moment. Just a man who looked at her like she was the only thing that could silence the noise in his head. But his world didn't let go that easily. Wolves never do. She left work late that evening, umbrella catching the silver drizzle under the streetlights. The streets were nearly empty, just the sound of her boots against wet pavement. She felt the shadow before she saw it, the same black car, the same smooth glide to the curb. The driver stepped out, face expressionless beneath the umbrella. Miss Amara, he said, voice calm, practiced. Mr. Moretti would like to see you. She clenched the strap of her bag. I didn't say I'd come. He didn't flinch. He didn't say you had to. For a moment, she wanted to say no, to turn and walk away. But the storm behind her was colder than the one inside that car. She slid in. This time, the mansion wasn't quiet. When the car passed through the iron gates, she could see the lights from the upper windows, shadows moving inside. The house that had felt like a private, quiet world now buzzed with movement. Men in suits murmured conversations. The faint glint of weapons beneath jackets. Dominic's world. Amara's heartbeat kicked up. She didn't belong here. She knew it with every step she took on the marble floor. Amara. She turned at the sound of his voice. Dominic stood in the doorway of his study, black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd just walked out of a storm, except the storm was him. Why am I here? She asked, trying to sound stronger than she felt. He didn't answer right away. He just walked closer, every step quiet and heavy. When he stopped in front of her, the world felt too small. Because someone's looking for you, he said softly. Her breath caught. What? They followed you yesterday after you left work. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking just below his ear. They weren't mine. Her stomach dropped. Who? He cut her off gently, not with impatience, but with control. Someone who thinks hurting you would hurt me? I don't need protection, she whispered. He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. Then why are you shaking? She hadn't realized it until then. Her hands were trembling. Her pulse was pounding like she was standing at the edge of something dangerous. You don't get it, she said softly. I'm not part of your world. Dominic stepped closer. The scent of his cologne, rain, smoke, something darker, wrapped around her like a slow pull she couldn't fight. His voice was quiet, controlled. You walked into it the moment you sat at my table. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. Wolves don't care what you meant. A knock broke the silence. Luca, his right-hand man, entered with two others. Their movements were sharp, silent, efficient. She's being watched, Luca said. 3 cars outside her building. Likely Mikhail's men. The name meant nothing to her, but the way Dominic's jaw locked told her everything. Handle it. Dominic said. Luca nodded and disappeared. No questions. No hesitation. And just like that, Amara realized something chilling. This wasn't new for him. Violence wasn't an event. It was routine. You need to stay here, he said. She took a step back. No, you're not safe. I don't belong in your mansion, Dominic, she snapped. I have a life. His gaze sharpened. That life is already in my crossfire. Her breath faltered. The air between them crackled, like thunder without sound. He stepped forward, closing the space between them until his chest hovered just inches from hers. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I didn't either. He murmured. His hand lifted slowly, almost hesitant, and brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. That single touch sent heat crawling through her chest. I can't let them touch you, he said quietly. Not because it's smart. Because I won't. Her heartbeat stuttered. Why? He looked at her then, really looked. Not like a man playing a game, not like a stranger she'd met by accident, but like someone who had already decided something in his bones. Because you're the only thing in this world I didn't plan for. The words burned through her like lightning. Later that night, she found herself standing near the tall window in his study. Outside, rain drenched the gardens. Inside, the house was warm and too still. She could feel the men moving around the property, guarding, watching. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. For the first time in years, she felt like she was standing on a line she couldn't uncross. Behind her, Dominic's reflection appeared in the glass, dark, steady, close. You're still here, she whispered. I told you, he said softly. I don't let go. His hand rested against the window beside hers. Not trapping her. Just there, solid, claiming space next to hers. She turned slowly. He was inches away, his face half lit by the rain-muted lights. His breath brushed hers. His hand moved up, fingers tracing her jaw like he was memorizing it. You're scared, he whispered. She nodded. His thumb brushed the corner of her lip. Good. Fear keeps you alive. And then he leaned closer, not enough to kiss, but enough to make her knees weaken. Enough to make the air between them spark like the edge of a flame. Her pulse roared louder than the rain. When she finally lay down in the guest room that night, she couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but outside, she could hear the faint sound of footsteps on gravel, his men. His world. And beneath it all, she knew he was still awake somewhere in this house, watching, protecting, waiting. She'd told herself she didn't belong here, but part of her already did. And down the hall, in the dim light of his study, Dominic Moretti stood by the window, sleeves rolled up, gun on the table, rain behind him, watching the storm and the woman who had unknowingly walked into his den. The storm had finally stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. The city slept uneasily. Streets washed clean but restless, like it knew that somewhere in the dark, Something dangerous was about to end Dot and in Dominic Moretti's mansion. Every shadow had its place, every man his weapon, and every door was locked Dot except one. The door to the guest room, her door, stayed open, because the wolf didn't lock what he wanted to protect. He watched it instead. Amara hadn't slept much. She woke to faint sunlight sneaking through the curtains and the echo of a world that didn't belong to her Dot downstairs. Voices murmured, men talking in short, sharp tones. Weapons clicking. Plans unfolding. When she stepped into the hall, Dominic was already there, black shirt, no jacket. Sleeves rolled high enough to show veins and the thin scar that wrapped around his forearm like a story untold. He looked up. You should have stayed in bed. I'm not your prisoner, she said softly. He took a step closer, gaze heavy, then stopped walking toward the danger. Luca entered, jaw tight. Mikhail's men just crossed the bridge. 3 cars. He's not hiding anymore. Dominic's expression didn't change. Only his fingers flexed once, then stilled. Good, let him come. Amara's heart sank. You're not actually going to... He looked at her, eyes dark. You think I can run from this? I am this. Then what about me? She whispered. For a moment, the air went still. He closed the distance between them, his hand brushing her cheek. Gentle but sure. You don't belong here, he said quietly. And that's why you'll survive this. Her voice cracked. And you? A faint smile ghosted across his lips. Wolves don't die easy. It started with headlights cutting through the fog. Then the crack of gunfire split the quiet. The mansion erupted, guards shouting, boots pounding on marble, the low growl of engines outside. The sound of the world collapsing in real time. Dominic moved like a shadow come alive, gun drawn, movements precise and silent. Lucas shouted orders down the hall. Get her out. Dominic barked, but before she could move, the windows shattered. Amara screamed as glass exploded across the floor, men in black flooding through the entryway. The smell of gunpowder and rain filled the air. Dominic was already moving. 2 shots, 2 men down. He grabbed her wrists, pulled her behind him, his voice low but unshakable. Stay behind me. She couldn't think, could barely breathe. All she could see was him, the way his shoulders squared, the way his jaw clenched, the way he fought like he'd been born for this. When the smoke cleared, the front door creaked open. Mikhail stepped inside, older, crueler, with the kind of smile that meant nothing good. He clapped slowly, mockingly. Dominic Moretti. Still protecting strays, I see. Dominic raised his gun. You made a mistake coming here? Mikhail laughed. You made one first. Falling for her. His gaze slid to Amara. She felt her blood run cold. Dominic didn't hesitate. The gunshot rang out before Mikhail could finish his sentence. But another man fired back. A flash, a sound, and Dominic staggered, hand flying to his side. Dominic? She cried. He caught himself against the wall, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Stay back. But she didn't. She ran to him, grabbing his arm, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. You're hurt. He covered her hand with his own. Not enough. And then he stood, pulling her behind him once more. This ends now. There are men who fight for money, men who fight for revenge. And then there are men who fight for something they can't name, something primal. Dominic was that kind of man. He moved through the room like the storm had come back to life, each step certain, each motion a sentence written in blood and purpose. Mikhail's men fell one by one. Luca covered him, but the kill was personal. When Mikhail tried to run, Dominic caught him by the collar, slammed him against the marble pillar, and pressed the gun to his throat. You touched what's mine, he growled. You don't walk away from that. Mikhail sneered. You're a fool. She'd leave you. Dominic's voice was calm. Maybe, but you won't live to see it. The gun fired once. Then silence. The mansion smelled like rain and smoke. The kind of silence that follows chaos hung thick in the air. Dominic stood in the center of the room, chest heaving, blood staining his shirt. He looked less like a man and more like the embodiment of everything he'd been running from, a monster built from fire and devotion. Amara approached slowly, her shoes crunching over broken glass. She touched his arm gently. "You're bleeding." He turned to her. "It's over." Her throat tightened. "It doesn't feel over." He gave a faint smile, eyes softening. "It never does." Later, when the chaos had quieted and Luca had taken the men away, Amara found him sitting by the window in his study, the same one, where she'd stood days ago. He didn't look up when she entered. The bandage on his side was fresh, his hand still trembling faintly. "You saved me," she said quietly. He looked at her then, eyes tired but still burning. "You shouldn't thank me for that." She frowned. "Why not?" "Because I didn't save you," he said softly. "I kept you." She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. The rain outside was soft again, like the sky had exhausted itself. "You could still leave," he murmured. "You should." She turned her head. "And if I did?" He exhaled slowly, eyes closing. "Then I'd let you go." She smiled faintly. "You're lying." His eyes opened, catching hers, that same dangerous softness that had ruined her first night at the wrong table. "Yes," he said. "I am." He reached for her hand. His fingers brushed hers carefully, as if asking permission one last time. When she didn't pull away, his hand closed around hers, strong, warm, real. "You don't have to stay," he said. She looked at him, the man who had turned her life upside down, who had fought, bled, and nearly died for her. The man who'd told her not to trust him, and yet was the only one who had never lied. "I know," she whispered. "But I want to." His jaw tightened, something raw flickering in his eyes. "You don't know what that means." She stepped closer. "Then show me." He rose slowly, standing close enough that the air between them shivered. His hand lifted, thumb brushing her lip, his voice low and rough. "You walked into my world by accident," he said. "But now you're part of it." She leaned into his touch. "And you?" His smile was faint, almost broken. "I was part of yours before you even knew my name." Her heart stuttered. "Dominic." He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm and unsteady. "You were never at the wrong table, Amara? Then where was I?" She whispered, "Home." The rain outside finally stopped. The world went quiet. And for the first time since the storm began, both of them breathed, not as strangers, not as captor and captive, but as two souls who had survived the same fire. "Ours," he whispered, and this time she didn't argue.